Are there enough seats, benches for everyone? Okay, good. Well, welcome to AVA. Thank you for coming to tonight's 10th anniversary of Mudroom. I'm Sheryl, the Executive Director. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of our storytellers. We have quite an interesting group tonight. Thank all of our staff, especially Sheryl, Sheryl Trainer, who's been overseeing the organization of this evening for the last 7 years. I'd also like to thank all the volunteers, including the volunteers who are on the committee, who helped make this, shape it the way it is. So thank you to all of them. And a special thank you to our super volunteer, Rich Fedorczyk, who greeted you at the door and helped us set up. He often tends wine at our openings. He's just amazing. So thank you to everyone who helped make this evening so wonderful. As AVA celebrates our 50th year, we have published a book documenting its history titled AVA at 50, 1973 to 2023, which can be purchased at the front desk during intermission or on your way out. It bears reflecting that AVA was founded and developed by passionate artists. The seeds were planted, and now, here we are, it has blossomed into this amazing place. A robust and unique organization that is one of the few places in New Hampshire, or in this part of the Upper Valley, to bring across strong, thought-provoking work that's both visual and verbal. So, besides your presence tonight, if you haven't already subscribed to our e-newsletter, which is the best way to stay on top of all the wonderful things that we have going on, we hope you'll do that. There's a kiosk in the front hallway if you don't get it. You'll find that there are many ways you can show your support for AVA. These include donating to our fundraising efforts, becoming a member, taking a class, attending these events. As always, AVA's galleries are free and open to the public Tuesday through Saturday from 11 to 5. So we hope to see you again often. I hope you enjoy seeing all your friends here tonight, as well as the talented storytellers. And without further ado, I want to introduce Sally Bacon to introduce our theme. Sally?
Well, hello everyone. As you know, it's our 10th anniversary, and I want to talk about storytelling for just a minute. Over the 10 years, I'm hoping that our stories have brought the community together in a way that if you hadn't been here, if you didn't attend, that you wouldn't connect in that way. You know, I'm hoping that our stories touch you, and you know, there've been stories about tragedies and love and humor, and that's why I think storytelling connects us in a way that nothing else does. You know, I think this is a time in our country where we all feel a bit lonely, and these kind of events, you sit there and you go, I thought I was the only one that felt that way, or I thought I was the only one that experienced that. And so what I'm hoping is that the audience a few people might tell me what the Mudroom has meant to them over the last 10 years. Anybody want to say anything? I know that's awful when I put you on the spot like that. You attend all the time. What has the Mudroom meant to you?
Oh, it's just fun stories, and you know, seeing the continued support from the community.
Well, we really appreciate your support. Thank you very much. And somebody in the back? Yes, stand up.
I love the Mudroom because for those of us who aspire to be storytellers and don't go down to Boston or New York for the lot, it's just such a great venue to come to, and you can walk there and have an amazing meal and just get together as a community. It's so great. And we don't have to be lonely. We can be together.
That's exactly right, yes. And it's really not difficult to get up here and tell a story because nobody's expecting you to be some professional. Really, it's about authenticity. So thank you very much for supporting us for 10 years. And at intermission, we're going to have cake in the hallway. So there's a cake to celebrate, and we want to celebrate you for, keeping us going. So our first storyteller is Molly. She just told me how to say her name too. Molly, I'm so sorry.
It's fine, it's all subject.
Okay. Molly is a social butterfly, and she's a theater person, and she loves to tell stories. So here you go, Molly.
I'm a little nervous. I got this.
Love you, Molly.
Love you too. So my best friend and I used to get fake married to each other every year. We have always been very close, and it's the kind of friendship that you can look at each other and know exactly what the other person is thinking without even communicating. And we were always together. And I felt like our friendship was so special. Every time we were together, it was like the universe was working with us. Somehow the Red Seas would part and everything would just fall into place because we were just that close. And we were always together. For the first few years of my 20s, I never had a phone. So anyone that wanted to get in touch with me would text my best friend. And at one point, we had a friend say, "Hey, this message is for your wife." And we were like, that's hilarious, but also kind of true. So that's where this brilliant spark of inspiration came. Our birthdays are only 3 weeks apart, and we figured, well, who doesn't love a wedding? Especially a wedding where there's no stakes involved at all. It's just a good time. So we leaned in and we went very hard. We took it very seriously. We invited all of our friends and we made them pick petals off of flowers to throw down the aisle. We'd both wear white. We'd walk down the aisle to Fur Elise. We would exchange ring pops as rings. We would smoke the ceremonial spliff at midnight. It was a party after all. So. And my boyfriend at the time was our master of ceremonies, our officiant. And we would write vows to each other every year. And when I was at the rehearsal on Sunday, it was suggested to me to try and talk about some of the vows that I had written. And I was like, well, God, I don't have those. That was 10 years ago. But as I was revising the story last night, I remembered actually some of the vows that I had given actually at the last wedding that we had together. And it had to do with lighthouses. Someone once told me that people are like lighthouses. Sometimes the lights are in direct opposition to each other. They never touch, and that's fine, c'est la vie. Sometimes you just don't connect with people. Other times your lights cross at different angles, and the idea is that the closer to the source of light, the more intense your connection is. And on rare occasions, your lights shine. You meet someone where the light shines directly into your own. And that's something really special, right? Especially in this world where there's a lot of darkness and heaviness. It's something to be celebrated to find someone who you connect with so deeply that you don't even need words to communicate. And that's how I felt about this person and continue to feel about this person. So we threw this wedding, and it was such a hit that we decided, well, we're going to do this 3 years on consecutively. And so every year we would have the renewal of the vows, and everybody loved it. It was a great time. And we'd consistently call each other, oh, my wife, this is my wife, to the confusion of many people that we would meet. Wait, you're best friends and you're married, but it's not real? That doesn't, I don't get it. And we would just laugh and give each other a knowing look, and they didn't have to get it. We got it, and it was hilarious. So as time went on, growing into our later 20s, as often happens at that time of your life, our lives were changing pretty significantly and in very different ways. My best friend left the job that we both had in the restaurant world in the Upper Valley for a more career-oriented job. She also got engaged to this guy that she had been dating for a while, who I wasn't super keen on. He was fine, but towards the beginning of their relationship, they were kind of on again, off again. And being her wife, that just wouldn't do. I mean, this wishy-washiness? Absolutely not. No, I mean, we were very civil and he was fine, but I love this person so much. I mean, if you're going to love and take care of this person, it's gotta be amazing, right? And so there was some doubt in my mind there. And also, she bought a condo with this person and was really growing and changing. And I, on the other hand, felt pretty stuck in my life. I was living at home with my parents. I love you both very much. But I was frustrated, I felt stagnant, I felt lost, I hated my job, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And so this rift of sorts culminated in a very public verbal altercation at one of our favorite bars in Hanover, Canoe Club, RIP. Speaking of which. And subsequently we didn't speak for 2 years. It was a really bad fight, yeah. And so 2 years goes on and I get an invitation in the mail for her wedding, which was not a surprise. I mean, I knew they were engaged. But she did surprise me when she randomly showed up to my place of work, Revolution at the time in White River Junction. And I was cautious but curious, certainly. So we started to converse, and of course the subject of the wedding came up, and totally innocuously, I mean, we hadn't talked for 2 years, but I was curious. I asked, who's gonna be your maid of honor? And she said, well, I'm here to ask if you will do the honors. I know, and I was very touched, but I was hesitant. I mean, you can't just jump back into something. We hadn't spoken for 2 years. You have to work through things and communicate and talk, and things are never gonna go back to the way they were, but you can move on and move forward, and so we did. So the planning of the wedding commenced, and over the next few months I sat down, I can't tell you how many times, to try and write my maid of honor speech. Now this shouldn't be hard. I've written vows for this woman 4 times in my life, right? I'm also an English major, I'm a theater lover, I'm pretty comfortable in front of other people, for the most part. This shouldn't be hard, right? I love Shakespeare, I love flowery language, I love injecting full emotion into things. Why can't I do this? Why can't I do this? And it was killing me. So fast forward to the night before the wedding, well, still hadn't written that speech. And after a long day of trying to decorate for this DIY wedding in beautiful Randolph, Vermont, and picking out shoes and what are we gonna wear for makeup and all of that, I went home and I sat in my bed at 2 a.m. and I tried again to write. And I burst into tears out of exhaustion, frustration. Why the hell can't I write this speech for this person that I love so much, that I have so much to say about, and I just can't seem to do it. What the heck? So I resigned myself to sleep because I'm getting up in 30 seconds anyways, so I gotta get something in, I have to sleep. And I wake up the next day and I'm in a panic. And I'm driving all day. I'm like talking to myself like a mad woman, trying to mentally write this speech. I'm driving up to Randolph, I'm talking to myself, going, no, that's not gonna work. Like, no, I hate that. Like, I'm steaming the groom's suit and my lovely, lovely wife's dress, talking to myself, nothing's coming. And honestly, it wasn't until the ceremony itself, when I listened to both of their vows, that something fell into place. Certainly my wife's vows were beautiful, but it was the groom's vows, the words that he spoke, the way he looked at her, that it hit me, oh, this person, the doubt that I had all along somehow dissipated. It was clear to me now that this person loved and cared for my wife just as much as I did. So, and it was like I was struck by a bolt of lightning of inspiration. So immediately after the ceremony is done, talk about last minute, I sprint to my car, I sit down, and I start furiously writing. And it's like a dam is broken. The words are pouring out of me, effortlessly seemingly. And if I do say so myself, it was a pretty good speech, actually. I was pretty pleased. And I took quotes from the groom's vows, and I peppered it with inside jokes about our weddings, for many of the attendees for the real wedding who had been to at least one, if not all four of our weddings. And so I finished writing in record time, sprinted to the reception to deliver this speech in front of all of our friends and family. And I ended the speech by telling everyone to, very Game of Thrones style, raise a glass, let's cheers to this lovely couple who let's wish them life, no, not life, well yes, life, but a lifetime of love and happiness and friendship and laughter that we can all see that you both continuously give to each other. And I would know, because I married her 4 times. Cheers. Thank you. Also, I just want to say that she's here tonight, my lovely wife Laura, with her baby that she had in July, with her lovely husband, who I love very much.
Oh, Molly, thank you very much. Our next storyteller, Pat McDivitt, thought he would not ever live here again. He was raised here, but we're really glad you came back. So here you go, Pat.
Thank you. It was the first Saturday in December of our first December living in the Upper Valley. My wife finished her coffee and she folded the Valley News and she looked at me and she said, "You know what I think we should do today? I think we should cut our own Christmas tree." I looked down at our 3-year-old and our 1-year-old and then at our 2-month-old and I said, "That sounds like a terrible idea. How about this instead? How about I go to Walmart, for $15 I will get a tree that was once alive, that is now conveniently wrapped in plastic netting. They will put it in the car and I will stop at Dunkin' Donuts on the way back." She persisted and I relented and she was right because she said, "It's our first Christmas in New Hampshire. It's our first time being here. We should do the New Hampshire thing. Like, this is the big event. Like, let's get out there and celebrate this." But my reluctance was not unfounded. While she grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in New Hampshire, and we most certainly never cut down our own Christmas tree. We spent $5 at the St. Patrick's School Holiday Fair. It was a fundraiser. It was the right thing to do. In 1968, my parents moved their young family of 5 from the Chicago suburbs to New Hampshire. I was nearly 4 years old, which meant I was nearly 4 years too old to ever be considered a local. That family of 5 soon grew to a family of 9, 7 kids born in an 8-year span. We lived in the southeasternmost town in the state of New Hampshire, and my dad would commute to Boston every day. And if you climbed the old fire tower on Jeremy Hill, you could actually see the Boston skyline, including the new John Hancock Tower where he worked. Now, really nobody in Boston had ever heard of our small town in New Hampshire, so we learned to politely say that we were from southern New Hampshire, implying there was a northern New Hampshire, but we had no knowledge of that. And we learned from the comments of my parents' new friends that they had really done right by us by moving us to New Hampshire, because the alternative had been Massachusetts. The road that I grew up on, there were 8 boys, all the same age, and we went by our nicknames. Scabby Al, Nick, Mush, Face, Brian, Skip, Ronnie, and Bell. And every day after school, and certainly all summer long, when we came home, we would do some combination of fishing, swimming, lighting firecrackers, playing kickball, building or tearing down tree forts. And if the preceding Saturday had featured Evel Knievel on ABC's Wide World of Sports, then for sure that week and probably the following week, we would spend seeing who could jump the most logs on their bicycle. And only Skip broke his arm trying to do that. It was an idyllic childhood, but it was the only childhood I knew, so most of its charms went largely unnoticed by me. I did notice the parts that weren't charming. Going every Monday morning to stand in line to get my free lunch ticket, the white ticket stamped with the word free. Going with my mom to do grocery shopping in the evening so she could pay with food stamps and avoid the prying eyes of neighbors. Emptying the large, hefty bag filled with clothes that had been donated on our living room floor. One day in 7th grade, a good friend of mine, a girl, came up to me and pointed at my pants and said, "Why are you wearing my jeans?" My mom gave those to the Salvation Army. My dad was not a hunter, so that part of life in New Hampshire was completely foreign to me. But in high school, I became friends with a boy named John, who was an avid hunter. He was from Coos County, the elusive northern New Hampshire, and he loved to talk about hunting. I had no idea you could get a deer that would be so large that you would need to cut it up in the woods. And I said to him, "How do you decide what to keep?" And he began his answer by saying, "We always save the heart for my grandmother." And I thought, dude, your grandmother is a witch. My experience growing up in New Hampshire in the early 1970s was sort of Norman Rockwell meets Roseanne Barr. It was not a place I wanted to stay, and I was happy to leave. And here I was, 25 years later, with my young family, now of 5. But there were some early signals when we moved here that maybe we had made the right decision, like maybe we were beginning to fit in. Maybe this was going to work out okay. One of my first weeks at work, one of my colleagues, knowing that I had a meeting with a real estate agent, said in late afternoon, without even looking up, "You better get going, you're going to get stuck at the light." And I thought, can we just reflect on that for a moment? Or how I really dissuaded my wife from getting air conditioning, because I said, "You don't need it. You don't need it." I mean, well, you need it, but there's only 1 or 2 days, and you savor those days, and you remember them, because you'll need that memory in February. But other than that, you don't need it. That summer, we discovered the incredible charm of cash boxes on card tables at the ends of driveways of pick-your-own blueberry farms. And we had survived the Pop-Tart incident of late August. Okay, the Pop-Tart incident started out as a Pop-Tart event, but was upgraded to incident once the facts became known. It was a weekday morning. I came downstairs. My wife was 7.5 months pregnant. And she stood in the kitchen with her hands on her hips and perspiration on her forehead. Partly because it was, in fact, one of those 1 or 2 days that you needed to remember in February. But more because she was mad, and she was mad at me. "Why do you insist on eating the frosting off the Pop-Tarts?" I thought of the things that I may have done, or may not have done, and this was not on the list. "Excuse me? You're eating the frosting off the Pop-Tarts, and you put them back in if you think I don't know." I genuinely don't know what you're talking about. She walked over to the small utility closet in our kitchen. Now, the house was built in 1931, so the utility closet largely held wires and pipes that went from the basement to the 2nd floor, and a broom and a dustpan and 2 small shelves. On the top shelf, she had an unlidded Tupperware container. Indeed, inside was an open foil package of Pop-Tarts sans frosting. "See," she said, "you eat the frosting and then I finish them, but you're really making me upset. And I said, see, pointed at the innumerable mouse droppings. But our son turned out fine. And now it was December and there was snow on the ground, and at least one person in the house was really committed to cutting down our own Christmas tree. We put the 3 kids into their snowsuits like little sausages and put them in 3 car seats in the back seat of the car, our small Honda Civic, 2 car seats facing forward, 1 facing backward. We lived on Lime Road and the tree farm was on Route 10, so we thought, well, we don't have far to go. We set off and I drove to what I believed was the northern limits of the Upper Valley. At which point I turned around and now I was squeezing the steering wheel and my shoulders were hunching, and we were scouring the road on both sides. And as we now approached our home once again, this time from the north, I could feel perspiration on my forehead, not because we lacked air conditioning, but because I knew that Walmart was just 20 minutes away. I reluctantly turned around and headed north once again and finally pulled over and asked for directions. Oh, you're so close. You just want to go up here around this bend on the right. You'll see the river on the left. Take the first dirt road on the right and then make an immediate right. You can't miss it. I thought, well, I've missed it twice already, but I appreciate your enthusiasm. So I followed those instructions, got to the top, pulled in next to this small wooden structure that had nails on the front with little balls of twine and saws. And there on a shelf was the still charming and apparently obligatory cash box. An old man was sitting by a campfire warming his hands. He had a baseball cap on and an old yellow dog sat next to him. As I got out of the car, I gave the door a little extra, and folded my arms just to make sure that everyone who cared knew how I felt about this. Morning, he said. How are you? Well, I paused for effect. I had a very hard time finding you. There's no sign. Yeah, he said. We had a sign last year. It was just crazy. I thought of something my father had told me many years earlier. My dad had adopted New Hampshire as his home, and he often wondered if New Hampshire would ever reciprocate and adopt him. And he asked a friend of his who was a native, and the man contemplated this question, and finally he said, Bill, it's easy to move to New Hampshire, but it takes real commitment to infiltrate it. So as we stood there in the snow after cutting down our first Christmas tree, I put the twine and the saws back and the money in the cash box, and I looked at my kids sharing orange juice and cookies with John O'Brien at his tree farm in Orford, New Hampshire. I thought, well, maybe this is how you infiltrate it. And I thought, no, maybe this is how New Hampshire is infiltrating me. Thank you.
I have to tell you, I have to thank you, Sue, for making so many trips here to tell your stories. She makes us laugh. It's just a joy to have her come from Burlington and tell us her story. So, Sue Schmidt, come on up.
So if you want an example of a perfect bell curve, you don't need to look any farther than the middle school chorus. Now, I'll tell you, in middle school, I was obsessed with bell curves, and partly because my family life was kind of a mess, and there was something really comforting about plotting things out in a mathematical way. I wasn't crazy about the chorus, but I had to take an elective. And back in the 70s, there were a couple of options for girls. The first option was typing. I didn't really think keyboarding was going to be a useful skill. And the second one was home ec. And following the souffle incident, where I made a sort of an explosion, they asked me not to return to that class. So here I was in chorus. And in chorus, on the bell curve, on the high end of the curve, you have kids that love to sing and can really sing well. And on the low end, you have kids that love to sing and can't sing at all. But the majority of that curve was made up of people like me, who could kind of sing but was not really interested in learning the words. So pretty quickly in, I realized I've got to come up with some kind of a strategy. So I invented what is now widely known as the reverbial delay method. And the way this went is I would pair myself up with a kid on the high end of that curve, and I would wait for them to sing their note. And then I would just jump in right behind them. Oh, oh, say, can you see? I thought this added enormous depth to the chorus. And most of the kids were really okay with it. As a matter of fact, the kids in the middle were like, please hook me up with a kid on the high end. And the kids on the high end were like, we've never been so popular. And the kids on the low end couldn't tell what they were singing, so they didn't really care. There was this one girl, Lisa Klempner, who after chorus rehearsal one day called me out to the director, Mr. Stentz, and went up to him and said, she doesn't know the words, she's cheating. And Mr. Stentz, who was paid by the New York Department of Education to teach me the words, looked at her and said, it's middle school chorus. So this method worked perfectly for 2 full seasons of chorus, and then we came on the winter concert. And O Tannenbaum was on the program. Now, the reverbial delay method worked in 9 different languages. And so this was not going to be a problem. And so the night of the concert came, and my grandmother, who is German and speaks German fluently, showed up at the concert. And the concert went brilliantly. And we got back to her house, and she said, that was so beautiful. Susan, please sing that again. And so my brother, who was at the table, who's always just waiting for an opportunity to take me down, and knew about the reverbial delay method, said, yes, please do sing that again. I think we'd all like to hear it. And so I started out strong, O Tannenbaum, O Tannenbaum, and then I kind of just quietly drifted off. Hab kein Delay, Rosen. Now luckily my grandmother had started to lose her hearing at this point, so she didn't really know what was happening, but my father, who was also at the table and spoke a little bit of German, leaned over and quietly said, let me just clarify what I think I heard you say. Oh Christmas tree, I have no traditional German pants. Those were the 4 words that I knew in German, and I had strung them together rather creatively, I thought. And so I immediately just jumped back in and said, let's sing something we all know the words to. Let's sing Edelweiss. We loved Edelweiss. It reminded me of the time we picked my grandmother up at the airport, the only time she had ever gone back to Germany. And she came through customs and she had her overcoat slung over her arm. And we got back into the car. And as soon as she got in the car, she took her overcoat off and she ripped open the seam. And from inside the seam, she pulled out this little bloom in a burlap sack. And she put it in my hand and she said, Wohlblumen, Edelweiss. And my father looked at her and said, oh my God, you've smuggled. And she said, across 3 countries' borders. And so the whole way home on the Belt Parkway, we sang Edelweiss. We sang every single word to the sound of music. My brother creatively adding his own lyrics. How do you solve a problem like my sister? I'm gonna spit on her head while I hold her down. So the next day, after we picked my grandmother up, we did some chores in the yard, and my grandmother and I planted this little sprig of Wohlblumen in the back garden. And for several years after that, after we were done with chores, we would sit in that garden and she would tell me stories of Germany and how in 1920 she had left Germany after her mother died. And she came into New York not knowing a soul and not speaking a word of English, and she started a new life. And so when my grandmother died and my brother and I were cleaning out her house, in the closet of her house there was this old steamer trunk. It was the trunk she had brought with her from Germany. And in the bottom of this trunk was a box, and the box had a return address that said Mühlacker, which was the name of her town, and the postmark was 10 years old, and she'd never opened it. And so my brother and I thought, there's probably a reason for this. We really want to respect that, and we did, for about 15 seconds. We ripped that package open, and there were some cards in there with the width and breadth of my German skills. I determined everybody had their pants on. And in the bottom of that box was a bunch of pictures of people we didn't know. And there's one picture of a man in a Nazi uniform. And on the back, it said Adolf Kling. And it was my grandmother's youngest brother. And the air just kind of got sucked out of the room. My grandmother was never a Holocaust denier. But we thought, is this why she never went back? Is this why all of the stories that she tells are prior to her leaving? Is this why she felt so disconnected to the place where she was born? And I took that picture and I sat outside in that beautiful bloom of Wohlblumen. And that's when I realized that if you want an example of a perfect bell curve, we don't have to look any further than our own lives. Because on the high end, the things we get from our families can be extraordinary. And if we care for them and we cultivate them, we can pass them down for generations. And on the low end, there can be horrible, difficult secrets that we push into the darkest corners. But most of our lives live solidly in the middle of that perfect curve, where we are all just humming along, hoping nobody realizes we don't know the words.
That was the first half. I want everyone to go and have some cake, and we will come back with the, we're going to put a story in if you want to tell a story, and we will come back with 2 audience stories and then the rest of the show. So go have some cake.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Sheryl.
Hi, Helen. Hi, Miriam. So, as Sherry told everybody earlier, today is the 10th anniversary of the Mudroom. And I just wanted to read something from the very first Mudroom that is still applicable today. In Ava's 40th anniversary year.
Sheryl, pick your head up by the microphone.
Sorry, I'm not used to doing this. In Ava's 40th anniversary year, it is wonderful to celebrate our past, our commitment to artists, students, and the community. As we look back at the breadth and strength of our classes, exhibitions, and community programs, we are delighted to be able to serve so many people of all ages and abilities in the Upper Valley. One of the most exciting things about AVA is that we are always interested in new programs and new ways to engage the community. The Mudroom is a perfect example. This wonderful evening of entertaining stories told in our beautiful galleries filled with exemplary artwork from local artists. We hope you will consider supporting AVA by becoming a member, please, because that's my budget line, or donating to our annual fund, which is open for this fiscal year right now. Please enjoy this evening and save. It was December 5th, but it's now December 14th for our next Mudroom. So, buy your tickets early. Don't wait till the last minute, please. Because it always sells out. And when we have things like sculptures around the room, it just makes things a little harder to do. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pick the next two storytellers. Who's going to drum? John Tomine will tell a story. This guy right here. And then, our own Sally Bacon will tell a story after him. So, John and Sally, who wants to go first?
Sheryl, do you want to tell people what the theme is?
John.
Oh, if you hadn't taken the program away, so no. Okay, so the theme for the next mudroom is memories. I believe that stories are due November 20th, and we will have a rehearsal on December 3rd. Oh, somebody has a program. Yay, thank you. So, everybody can tell a story.
Do we have a stool because he has a hard time standing?
Yes.
I'll get one.
Travis knows. Okay. And also we have to pick the raffle winners.
Okay. Alrighty. So our theme is going to be memories, which, come on, everybody has memories, you know. So I expect to see a lot of stories submitted. It'll be fun. Yeah, so that's on the 14th of December. Mark your calendars. We're going to get a stool for John so he can tell his story. We're waiting for a stool for John so he can tell his story. He has a harder time standing for very long.
And meanwhile, we're going to pick raffle, you can do it.
Now what's this for?
This is going to be for 2 mudroom tickets.
It is Nate Pearson.
All right. And the next one is going to be for family membership.
Family membership. Sarah Berman.
Thank you for putting all your information on there.
That's right.
That's going to make my life so much easier. And 2 more mudroom tickets.
2 more mudroom tickets. Yay. Anne Greenwald.
All right. Okay.
Take this. And you need here. Does this go down?
I don't know what's Travis.
Travis. Okay. I'll take that. Okay. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for the stool. If any of you know someone who has Parkinson's disease and they struggle, send them to me. I teach people with Parkinson's how to live life better. That's why I need a stool, actually, because it's difficult at this time of the day when I'm winding down. It becomes more difficult to stand. Catch me in the morning and I'm full of energy. This story comes from a book that I have been writing. I started writing it over 20 years ago, and it took too much of my energy to write, and so I set it aside to wait till I retired. Well, I retired 6 years ago, and 3 years ago I began working on preparing to finish writing the book. I was hoping that I could read this story because it's all written down, but I'm going to ad-lib it. I'm telling a story in the voice of the main character of the book that I'm writing. The book is, in its working title, is titled The House That Pain Built. It's a story about Jack. And in this chapter, titled Dinner with Helen, Jack is in Chicago, having dinner with an old woman who he barely knows. He only knows her name, and he knows a few things about her. But she seems to know everything about him. She's enamored with him. They're in a restaurant in downtown Chicago that offers lobster, clam chowder, and New England foods. Jack, being from Boston, suspects that it's not nearly as fresh as what he can get at home. So he decides to ignore the clam chowder and the lobster dinner and seek for something else. He's distracted by thoughts of Helen as she peruses the menu. And moments later, Helen turns to Jack and says, "Dear, I'll have the chicken pot pie." Helen comes from an era when men chivalrously ordered dinners for their lady guests. And so she left it to Jack to order her dinner. As they talked, Jack thought about the years that had gone by and wondered when the last time was that he had seen Helen. Was he 9? Was he 12? He couldn't remember clearly, but he remembered one occasion when Helen came to visit. She took Jack and his 3 siblings, the 4 of them, to a downtown hotel in Syracuse, New York, and spent the weekend. And the most notable thing about that weekend was that every morning, Helen would get up and sit in front of the mirror with the tweezers and hand pick every single eyebrow hair out of her head, and then paint her eyebrows back on with a pencil. And this task, along with the other tasks that Helen did each morning, would take about 3 hours, while the children were becoming more and more rowdy in the hotel room. There were other memories that he tried to bring to mind as she continuously interrupted with questions about Jack's career, how he had advanced, and so much that she wanted to know, and yet so little that Jack wanted to know. He tried to remember other occasions, like the time that Helen's sister died, and Jack sought for an opportunity to spend some time with her and try and understand the sense of heritage. And he found her to be an overly chatty, this is where I forget this part, and I wish that I was reading it. But he hoped to find meaning and yet he was not able to not in Helen. He would have to find his own meaning along the way. But he did distinctly remember traveling to south of Chicago one year in Thanksgiving when Jack had grown and he had children of his own. He took his children to visit Helen for Thanksgiving. Had some struggles along the way. The most notable was the day at the point where he crossed the Canadian border to get a shortcut to Detroit. And the Canadian guards, border guards, separated Jack from his children and delayed the trip by many hours as they tried to ascertain whether Jack was kidnapping these children from their mother, despite the fact that he was their father, custodial father at that. So he struggles his way, makes his way to Blue Island, Illinois, where Helen lives, to spend Thanksgiving. And while he's there, he notices something for the first time, something that he had always wondered about. He sees in the apartment where Helen lives with her husband Leonard the distinct signs of violence. The fist-sized and shaped hole in the hallway wall. The bathroom door that has a broken hinge, torn partway off on the other side. And Jack realizes for the first time that the struggles in his own life were not just isolated, but that there was a generational history. And he sets himself on a path, committing himself in some way, somehow, by God's grace, to set his children free from the generational inheritance of trauma. This is one chapter in a book called The House That Pain Built. It is a dramatic nonfiction that tells the story of generational inheritance of trauma, and hopefully will reveal some understanding of how to break it. I give you Jack. That's all. Thank you.
I'm back.
Does anyone know Andrew? I've forgotten his name. No. There's a great speaker who I knew for many years. He told me once I had to tell a story to a group of people once a number of years ago, and I asked him, how do I do this? And he said, when you start, Make them cry in the first 2 minutes. And then make them laugh. And then before you finish, make them cry again. And that time it worked. But telling this story, I could not figure out how to make anyone laugh. But I did just now.
Well, I came from a family that was really very middle class. And growing up, you know, I had no sense of, you know, somebody had more money than anybody else. Everybody in our neighborhood, our houses were, you know, a little different, but nobody's house was bigger or, you know, we had no sense of wealth or poor for that matter. We were all pretty much the same. And it was an Italian-Irish neighborhood, and most of the kids for grade school went to Catholic school, and, you know, you wore uniforms, and, you know, so, you know, life was, I mean, it was just pretty ordinary. We all, as a matter of fact, I thought you know, my family, I didn't had anything I wanted, and, you know, everything seemed just fine until it was time to go to high school. And in high school, our county, or our township, fell into this really wealthy high school area. And it was a brand new high school that had just been built. And so we were going off to Fox Chapel High School. And I mean, I heard it was a wealthy high school, but, you know, really I had no concept of what that even meant. But my best friend and I, Kathy Tomko, you know, we were nervous, but we were more nervous about, we were going to high school, you know, and worried about that. And so, you know, Kathy, I was a pretty good kid when I was younger, and Kathy and I made this pact. We were going to be virgins, for sure. That was one thing, because we heard that high school girls are giving it up, right? And they're giving it up, and, you know, they're drinking and stuff. Not us. We are going to be virgins, and that was very important to me. And so we get to high school, and it was quite, you know, I was bussed in, and it was absolutely, Fox Chapel is a beautiful, beautiful neighborhood, suburb of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Forget Kathy's name. I shouldn't have used her real name. But anyway, we're in high school, and we meet all these, you know, I'm meeting a lot of wealthy kids. I'm going to birthday parties at their homes, and their homes were really, really beautiful, huge, on sprawling properties, you know, big brick homes. Everybody drove a really fancy car, and my dad bought a new car like every year. He bought a Ford, you know. Well, these weren't Fords, you know. So anyway, it was an experience, and I was seeing all this new stuff, and also I heard that the cheerleaders were having sex and stuff, and there were parties, and anyway, on Mondays we would be sitting in the lunchroom, and the girls that were really wealthy were telling me what they stole that weekend, and I'm like, what? And they said, yeah, but, you know, we go shoplifting every weekend. And I said, you steal? And they're like, well, of course we steal. And I'm like, well, why would you steal? Well, because why would you pay for it? And I'm like, why would you pay for it? I said, well, stealing's illegal. And they're like, Sally, don't be stupid. Nobody pays for anything. You know, everybody steals. So I'm like, wow. So it's my 16th birthday. My dad gives me his credit cards and tells me to go downtown. And I got to tell you something, I loved my dad. My dad and I were really close, and, you know, he was all about integrity, your reputation, all that. And he gives me his credit cards and he says, go buy whatever you want. So Kathy Tomko and I, Kathy's now 6 months pregnant and smoking cigarettes. I'm like, what? You know, she's like, I thought I was in, I don't know, the Twilight Zone, because, you know, things were really changing. So Kathy and I get downtown, and I said, okay, we're going to steal. She goes, what? I go, yeah, we're gonna steal. I said, all the rich kids steal, so why should we pay for anything? So we go to the first department store, and I'm taking a few things. I'm taking stuff that they probably would have given us, you know, the perfume little things on the counter and stuff, you know, and I'm stuffing them in my bag, and, you know, I'm thinking I'm really bad. And, you know, so we're walking along. She's walking there smoking a cigarette. She's pregnant, and I'm thinking, I thought we were going to be virgins. And she goes, and you want to steal? And I'm like, oh man, things got way off the track, right? And so we're like, so we go into the next department store, and I'm going to try on a pair of Levi's. So we're in the dressing room, and I try on these Levi's, and I said, okay, Kathy, you're going to steal these Levi's for me. She goes, I don't want to steal them, Sally. I said, don't be such a baby. I said, I stole that stuff for you. I said, don't be a baby, steal these pants. And I said, put them in your bag. So she does. And we walk out of the dressing room, and 2 security guards grab us, and they take her one way and me another way. And they put me in this room, and they close the door, and there's this huge mirror, and it says, look at yourself, what have you done? Look, I gotta tell you, I was supping. You know, I was crying so hard because now they're going to call my dad. My dad, I have credit cards in my pocket to buy things, right? And they're going to call my dad. It was his volleyball night. He plays volleyball. I knew he was going to be so mad at me, and I didn't know like what I was going to say. So my father picks me up, and of course he's so disappointed. Why did you steal? You know, you could have bought anything you wanted. And I said, Dad, I did not steal. I said, did you notice Kathy's 6 months pregnant? I said, Kathy stole those pants. I didn't steal those pants. So I threw her under the bus. Well, she got pregnant. She told me she was going to be a virgin. It's only fair, you know, so. Anyway, so, you know, we're going home, and I said, you know, she stole the pants, and, you know, I was just with her. And well, the thing back then, and I don't know if that's true anymore today, but if you got caught shoplifting, you couldn't work in retail. And I've always loved fashion, and I always wanted to be in retail. So next day, you know, goes by, and I come home, and my dad said to me, Sally, I went to Horns, and I asked to talk to the management, and I told them how badly you want to work in retail, and that it really wasn't fair that Kathy took the jeans, you know, and you were just with her. He said, and I understand that my daughter's, you know, guilty by association, you know, because she was with her, but, you know, do you really have to, like, hold this against her? And I said, you did? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, that was really nice, Dad, thanks. And I'm like, oh my God. And he said, and guess what? I said, what? He said, they played a little recording for me. Kathy, don't be such a baby. Take these. I took other stuff for you. I was like, what? I looked at him. I said, is that even legal? And he goes, he looked at me and he said, go to your room. Now, I went to my room, and there was no mirror in there saying, look at yourself, what have you done? But honest to God, I didn't think I'd ever come out of my room. I never wanted to see my dad again. He had given me this whole lecture years ago about how all you have is your word and your reputation, and it takes one thing to tear it down. I didn't think that my dad would ever trust me again, or, you know, so it took a while for, you know, me to repair that, but I never stole again, I can tell you that. So, anyway, thank you very much.
And now she owns a shop, so don't go there and steal. Karma's a bitch, you know. So our next storyteller is Paul Coates, who everybody in Lebanon knows. He's a transplant from Georgia who hiked to New England on the Appalachian Trail and has lived here for over 20 years. He gets to help make Lebanon a close-knit, active community through his work at Lebanon Recreation, Arts, and Parks. He and his wife, Kristen, love to travel, hike, run, celebrate with friends, and tire out their dog, Norman. Welcome, Paul.
Wow. Well, I was 27 years old, I was young. I loved outdoor adventures. I was fit, maybe even invincible. I was intelligent, maybe just like smart with an abundance of confidence. But I was with a group of 10 of us, and half of them I knew. They were part of Chris's party, the groom, Chris. We all knew Chris really well, so that was half of us that I knew really well, because I'm a great childhood friend of Chris's. And half of the group I don't know at all. They're really tight friends with the bride, Allie. Hey, Allie. And but we're all out there together. The whole group is about the same age as me, mid-20s, late 20s. And we are going on a destination wedding. Now, this is before the term destination wedding was something that you could even type into a search bar on this newfangled thing called Google. But our destination wedding was going to be in Yosemite National Park. It's a magical place. In Yosemite, we're enjoying and just awestruck by places like Half Dome and El Capitan and going up to the Sequoia redwoods. But our real destination were the high peaks of Yosemite, and we were going to have a wedding at an alpine meadow by an alpine lake. And the real destination here is a 4-day hike to one of these alpine destinations. And this lake that we want to get to us at the moment is just a little dot on a map. That's all we know. So this is going to be a grand adventure that we're all super excited about, right? I mean, we're like big eyes and we're got all this energy and we're super excited, but a bunch of the folks in the group have, it's more of a nervous energy, right? Like, we're backpacking. Am I going to be able to carry everything that I need for 4 days in a backpack? And going to the bathroom in the woods? Like, how is that done? And freeze-dried meal? What is that? Is it astronauts do that? I don't know anything about freeze-dried meals. And there's this whole issue of bears. Like, we're going to backpack and sleep with bears. So, justifiably nervous energy. But not me and not Chris. I'm like, I've got the outdoor adventure card like to spades. I have all this experience in the backcountry. I just have all this confidence. It's just sort of oozing out of my pores. We're gonna do things like leave no trace backpacking ethics, where we know how to, if you got to go to the bathroom, you like go in the woods and you dig a hole and you like do your thing and you cover that all up to protect your water sources. And bears, no problem. Like, what we're going to do is we're going to stuff all of our food into these bear canisters, and these bear canisters, they're rugged and they're hard plastic, and you screw the lid on and bears can't get into them. So our food's going to be great. And camping, no problem. Like, you put your food over in one spot and you store it over there, and you camp at a different place, and bears are not going to be interested in you. So we're teaching everybody all these ethics about what it means to go backcountry camping and hiking. But there's one thing I'm not confident about. That's the sleeping arrangements. So on this hike, again, about half the group is with Allie, and Allie's group is mostly made up of couples who are married. And so, clearly they're going to be tenting on their own. And on Chris's side, there's a few of us, and there's 2 of the guys who are close friends of mine. They've already agreed that they're going to tent together. And that just leaves, and then you've got Chris and Allie, like they're going to be married, so they got a tent together. And that just leaves 2 of us. There's me, and there's Patty. Well, Patty is a complete stranger to me. She's part of the Allie crew, and I don't know anything about Allie. She knows nothing about me. So the current plan is for me to carry a tent, and I'm going to sleep on my own, and Patty's going to carry a tent and sleep on her own. But we spent a couple days, like we're exploring parts of Yosemite, and we're packing all of our stuff up, and we're going to do this in style. This is a wedding, so we're packing wine, we're packing wedding cake, we're stuffing wedding cake into these Tupperware bins, and we're going to do the whole thing, like to the nines. We got all this extra food, way more than any respectable backpacker would really ever carry, but we're bringing it all. So we're stuffing all this stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to carry my own tent and sleep in it and have Patty carry her own tent and sleep in it. So I go up to Allie and I'm like, Allie, what do you think? Like, Patty doesn't know me, but it would be really wise if we shared a tent. What do you think Patty will say about that? And Allie's like, Patty? She'll be all about it. Don't you worry. Just go ask her, and it'll be fine. So I'm like, all right. So I go up to Patty, and I say, Patty, what do you think? Like, food, it's heavy, and all this stuff. And we got a backpack, and are you cool with sleeping in the same tent as me? She's like, I do not want to sleep in my own tent. There's going to be bears out there. I have no desire to pack and sleep in my own tent. So the deal is sealed. We're going to share a tent. All right, so we go about the business of packing everything up. We hit the trail. We have a glorious first day of backpacking. We climb these ridges. We're up in these alpine meadows. We're hiking next to these gorgeous streams. We find our first campground for the night. And it's perfect, right? We got this great water source. It's a beautiful stream. There's a nice flat area for us to pitch our tents in. And there's a great area for us to do all of our food and cooking and eating and stuff. So this is where we start talking about freeze-dried meals. So for our freeze-dried meals, the key to them is, I don't know if you never had a freeze-dried meal, but there's like no water in there. You take a nice meal and you suck all the water out of it, and then you put it in a bag, and you carry that bag, because it's lighter now, in your backpack or your bear bin, and then you pull it out, and then you add hot water to it, and you seal it up, and that rehydrates the meal. And it's not going to turn out like a new lasagna or something. It's just a nice meal that you didn't have to carry all that weight. The key is you got to let them rehydrate, because if you don't let it rehydrate in the bag before you eat it, it's going to rehydrate in your stomach, and that is not good. So we're having these meals together, and we're hanging out. We're having a really nice time around the campfire, and then we look over, and Patty is like, she's gone from super cheerful and just like, all right, I'm in this. She's got tons of personality, and now she's kind of like, you know, she's kind of hunched over like this, and I say, Patty, are you okay? And she's like, I don't feel very good. I said, all right, what's going on? She's like, my stomach, I don't know about that meal. It doesn't really agree with me so much. So we said, okay, Patty. She's like, I'm just gonna go lay down in the tent and try to get some rest. We said, that's cool. Tents are right over there. We got you covered. You go sleep it off, and hopefully you'll feel better in the morning. So after that happens, you know, we're putting all of our bear stuff, all of our food back in the bear canisters, and we're thinking, all right, we got this great plan. We're gonna pile the bear canisters in a pyramid. We're so smart. So we're gonna pile these bear canisters in a pyramid, and so the bears, if they come to our camp, they're gonna like try to go for this food, and they're gonna try to get into these bear canisters. They're gonna crash down around the bears. It's gonna scare them off. It's at least gonna notify us that we've got bears in the camp. And so we do all that, but what we also figured out was we're living in luxury here. We got the wedding cake, we got bottles of wine, we got all this extra food. It doesn't all fit in the bear canisters. So we've got to do the next best thing, which is hang a bear bag. Now, if you've ever hung a bear bag, the concept is pretty simple. You want to get the food up in the air where a bear can't reach it. And the idea is that you'd get that food bag at least 20 feet in the air, because, you know, bears, they're like 17 feet tall. So, you know, 20 feet's just out of reach. And you got to get it away from the tree branches enough so that a bear can't just climb the tree and grab the bag from the tree. So, again, you know, overabundance of confidence, we're like, we're going to hang the perfect bear bag. So we took our rope, we hung it up one tree, and we took the other end of a rope and hung it on a different tree. There's nothing in between. We put the bear bag in the middle, we hoisted both lines, and the bag just went up, way up, 20 feet in the air, no tree anywhere near it. It was like suspended up there like the moon, where the bears, there's no way they were gonna get it. They're gonna look at it and go, how do we get this? So the bear bag was hung, and we're like, we are golden. It's time to go to bed. It's like getting cold. It gets like 30 degrees overnight up there at the high meadows. So we're like, all right, we all just gotta go crash now. So I get in the tent. Patty, she's curled up in her bag. She's cozy. She's like, I think she's doing all right. I crawl into my tent. We're all exhausted. We got a big day of hiking tomorrow. So I fall asleep. And I don't know, an hour into my sleep, I'm dead asleep. And I get this, I'm just startled awake. And I'm getting shaken like this. And she's going, Paul, 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 Paul. And so I wake up and was like, whoa, what's going on? What? and it's Patty. She's wide awake. She's going, Paul, I don't know. I've been listening. The bears, they've come through camp. They're at the food. I can hear them over at the food. They're getting into our food. They're going to come into a camp. I don't know what to do. I'm so nervous. I'm just so nervous. I don't feel very good. And I was like, Patty, it's okay. We're going to be okay. Let's just, okay, let me see if I can hear these bears, right? If they're in camp, I want to find out where they are. So we're both quiet and we listen. And I don't hear the bears. I don't hear anything. And I said, Patty, I totally trust you. I believe you. I'm sure you heard the wildlife walking through. It probably was a bear, but it's gone. Like I don't hear a bear out there right now. So I think it's moved on. Like, I mean, we had the pyramid and the bear bag, and there's no reason for the bear to hang around. Like, we're good. We've done everything right. There's no food in our tent. It's like, could be food, but that's not, I don't tell her that. So she's like, yeah, but I'm just so nervous and I really don't feel very good. She's just really nervous. I said, okay, let's just stay up a while and we'll chat. Like, we're strangers, so we talked about our childhood. Patty, how do you know Allie? Paul, how do you know Chris? Like, what do you want to do with your life? We just talked for like an hour. We were chatting, and as we talked, we're calming down. And it was nice. We had a nice conversation, but it's getting to be like midnight at this point in time. And like, Patty, we've got a long day of hiking tomorrow. We gotta go to sleep. Are you okay to go to sleep? And she's like, yeah, I think I can now. It's like, okay, good. So we both hit the pillows and we're both sound asleep. And about a half an hour later, something wakes me up. But it's not Patty. And I'm thinking, was this a dream that woke me up, or did something wake me up? So I'm still laying there, my eyes are still closed. And I'm listening, and I hear it. And there's bear in our camp. Like, I can totally hear bear over by our food storage area. And I'm thinking, all right, we should be okay. I mean, the pyramid, the bear bag, no food in the tent. We're gonna be okay. So I'm just gonna make sure Patty's still asleep, because she does not need to know that we have bear in the camp. If she's asleep, she's gonna stay sleeping. So I open my eyes and look where Patty's head should be, and it's not laying there. So I look up, and Patty is sitting, legs out in front in a perfect L shape, at attention, like this, and is clearly wide awake, and is hearing all the same things that I'm hearing. So I just, as calmly as I could possibly say, Patty, are you okay? And Patty says, well, she takes a deep breath, and she says, I heard the bear come into camp. They're at the food. They're eating all their food. We're going to starve to death, and they're going to come over here, and they're going to rip into our tent, and we're all going to be mauled, and all the and I got to poop. And I said, okay, yes, I definitely, the bear there. I think we're going to be okay. But that last thing he said, like, can you hold it? And she says, I've been holding it for 4 hours. I can't hold it anymore. And I said, all right, now I'm getting nervous now. So I said, okay, let me check out the scene. So I get out my headlamp, and I'm unzipping the door of my tent, and I'm cold. It's like 30 degrees, so I'm shivering, and I'm really nervous. So I've got the cold shiver, and I've got the nervous shiver, so my headlamp is going like this. And I'm expecting to see a couple little beady black bear eyes looking back at me somewhere around the food cache area. I don't see the little eyes looking back at me. It's gone quiet now. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna get out of the tent, Patty. So I crawled out of the tent, and now I'm really shaking. I'm looking around, and I don't see the bear out there. And I was like, okay, well, this is good. So I said, all right, Patty, jump out here. So she jumps out. And I said, let's go behind the tent. She's like, do we have to go in the woods? Do I have to dig a hole? Do I have to do all this? And I was like, no. You're not doing any of that leave no trace crap. You're going to go right here behind the tent. And I said, I have no desire to watch you drop your pants and go to the bathroom, but I am going to stand right next to you. And she said, you better not leave me. So there I stood with my headlamp looking out to see any prowling bears that are still around. Patty's doing her thing from here to there, right next to me. And we survived. She did her thing. We jumped back in the tent. We zipped up the tent. We crawled in our sleeping bags, and we looked at each other and we said, we did it. And we lay down and we fell asleep. And the next thing I remember, it was first thing in the morning, my buddy was out in camp and it's daylight outside, and he said, well, they got it. And we said, well, we better go outside and see what that means. Well, do you know, those bear climbed one of the trees that we had put the rope in, found the rope, sliced the rope with their paws, the food bag dropped to the ground like a piñata, and they had a buffet on the ground. They never once touched our bear bins. They were still in that pyramid. It did nothing. So I learned on that trip that A, I'm not nearly as smart as I wanted to think that I was, but also that with some really good friends and new friends that were recently strangers, we can survive just about any great adventure. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. That was great. Our next storyteller is Cindy Pierce, who many of you may know. She's a comic storyteller, educational speaker, innkeeper, mother, author of several books. How do you find the time? She has developed and performed multiple solo shows since 2004 as a social sexuality educator. That's an interesting job. Cindy presents to a wide variety of audiences on the topics of healthy choices and respectful relationships online and off. She lives in Etna with her family, and they own and run Pierce's Inn. So welcome, Cindy Pierce.
Okay. My father went out of his way to make sure I became an assertive person, and he encouraged me to challenge anyone who tried to push me around. I'm the youngest of 7 children, and as time went on, when he got to those 6th and 7th child, he realized the world was not fair to girls and women, especially his girls and women. So he fueled my feisty fire. But what he didn't know is one day that feisty fire might be turned on him. So it was fall, dusk, late in the afternoon, turning to evening, and my sister Sarah was driving me home and herself home from practice, and she was driving in her socks and she had removed her smelly cleats, so we're bombing home, and a police officer pulled us over and gave her a whopping speeding ticket and a mean scolding about not wearing shoes while she drove. Now, luckily, Sarah, she made a lot of money, so she was mad about the ticket, but she could cover all the expenses, and if our parents said she had to pay for insurance, she was in. She could pull that off. So we roll into the kitchen for dinner, and our parents are kind of in the middle of a conversation, and Sarah boldly announces that she had gotten a speeding ticket. And we expected that my father would be mad, but we didn't think that he would react as if she had committed the most heinous crime. He gets off his stool, he raises himself up to his full 6'4", he raises his hand, his face is getting red. This is a speeding ticket, people. And he is about to roar. Now, I need to pause here to tell you 3 things would make my father roar: politics, money troubles, and misbehaving children. Mind you, these parents had raised 5 teenagers in the 60s and the early 70s. And these teenagers, some of them were wild and rebellious and just plain naughty. And the police were calling, the school was calling. I mean, it was they were put to the test. And here we are with a speeding ticket. And when we lived back in Connecticut with all those kids home, my mom had to wrangle the kids until my father got home. And when he got home, she handed him the baton, and he was then in charge of advising kids, sorting through the issues, and being the disciplinarian. So that guy came from a stressful job in New York City, got off the train, arrived home, poured himself a whopping martini, took that baton, and got in the game of parenting for the rest of the night. Now, when we moved to New Hampshire, most of the kids were grown, so the discipline wasn't as big of a deal. His politics were mellowing, but there were some money troubles because they bought an inn, and within 2 years, all of their money was gone. And so now money troubles were the topic, right? Like that's where they would focus. And of course, my dad, the martinis, having a couple martinis to calm your nerves, that was the go-to way. So when Sarah and I came into that kitchen, the night of the speeding ticket, what we didn't know is that our parents had been really deep in a conversation about money and the challenges of keeping Pierce's Inn open and afloat. And this put my dad into his third martini by about 6:45. And so they were in a grip. It was sketchy times. And so we were not aware of this. Now, our parents, when punishments were going to be doled out, this is how it happened with our parents. They would witness, hear whatever was going on. They would find a place to consult, become a united front. Sometimes it took a while. And then they'd return, and one of them would lay down the punishment. But that did not occur this night. My dad, impulsively, in full roar, he said to my sister, "You are grounded for 3 weeks, and you will not drive the car for 3 weeks." We were all shocked. And Sarah burst into tears, and she ran out of the room. My mother, practical woman that she was, she came around that corner, she roared right back at him, and she said, "Reg Pierce, this is ridiculous. You are being ridiculous. Who's gonna pick up those girls at practice every afternoon?" Now Reg looked a little sheepish, but he decided to dig his heels in, right? He doubled down on his punishment, and he got behind it. And so he roared some more, and then those two start bickering. And I'm standing there watching this, and I've had it. I have witnessed all my siblings go head to head with my dad on these topics, politics, whatever it is, and I have had it. So I decide to speak up, and I yell at the top of my lungs, "Dad, your punishment is unreasonable." You guys, I'm like 4'10", like going into battle. I'm this little goober. And my parents stop and stare at me. They're stunned. They can't believe it. Now I have a little Undivided, and I added to that. And when you overreact in that loud voice, it is very scary. Now, he has not been challenged in this way. I'm in his face. And I'm a little nervous, but I am having none of this. I am not backing down. And so he turns to me and he says, "Don't you speak to me that way." And I turned to him and said, "Don't you speak to me that way." And my mother, she said, "Okay, let's get to the table." She corrals us over to the table, serves up dinner. She puts herself between us, right? He's at the head of the table, I'm to her left, and we are going at it, repeating, yelling, and she doesn't say a thing. She smirked through the whole thing. She loved it. She was like, "I'm just gonna let this go. I'll just kind of referee if needed, but I'm gonna let it roll." So we're going. By the end of dinner, I am in a rage. I am crying. I have gotten up on my knees so I can point and slay my points at eye level, and my dad's furious and he's coming at me and we are yelling, we are angry. Now we all know when you're yelling in a rage of anger, that's not coming from a strong place. You know, anger is almost always about fear. And my dad was deeply fearful of losing control of his children, of losing their business, of losing the life he loved so much in New Hampshire. In my little 9th grade world, my life was, like, in my mind, so tragic that 2 of my best friends decided to go off to private school. And my 2 other best friends decided that the Peter Pan, Harriet the Spy life was not for them. And they wanted to be normal teenagers. So I was deeply fearful of being alone in the world. So we have 2 people, and from their perspective, backed in a corner just trying to survive, right? And that speeding ticket really was the match that lit this fire. So we get into it and we start back at it and we're going round and round in this conversation like we are battling. It's not even a conversation. We're in full throttle battle. And I'm now irritated that we're like repeating the same thing, martini talk. I'm like, yeah, but I get stamina. I'm gonna hang in here no matter what. And so like it's exhausting, it's irritating, but I decided, you know what? We're in this deep. I'm going next level. So I accused my father of being drunk. And I said, and when you drink too much, you're not just scary, you're mean. He is rattled. He is off kilter. No child has ever said these words to his face. I am the first, trained by the 6 before me. And I'm like, I'm having none of this. So he pulls himself together and then he leans over towards me. And in the most terrifying hiss, he says, you come over here and say that. And I lean in and I hiss. I'm very scared to do that because it looks like you might hit me. He raises his fist and says, I do not hit my children. And he bangs on the table. And I said, I think this situation might make you change your mind. And I realize I'm way deeper than I ever expected, but I'm still full throttle, I'm going. And now my mother's like, okay, all right. So she holds us back in case one of us starts like hurling and something could unleash. So she backs us off. And then we get back to the round and round, just back to the same back and forth, same arguments, same this and that. So my mom feels like, all right, this feels like we've been in this for 2 hours. I think I can step away. She cleans the kitchen, starts the dishwasher, heads off to bed. And our battle goes on for another full hour. And yell, scream, rage, furious. And then suddenly, my dad gets off his stool and he lays down on the kitchen floor. Now, watching a 6'4" man who is painfully inflexible was a sight to behold. I even like had a little bit of an out of body, like, wow, this is something. It's like watching a chaise lounge like try to get itself down. So it took a bit. But I didn't even like argue at this point. I just watched this situation go down. He gets down on the ground, he crosses his arms, crossed his chest, and he says, I have been defeated. And I scrambled off my stool, came around, stood over him, and with an accusing point, I said, you bet you have, you bet you have. And I ran out to the other room to find my sister Sarah. on the couch, surrounded by her homework, wide-eyed, stunned, still in her field hockey gear, 3 hours later. And we looked at each other. We didn't even get along, I just want to point out. And we looked at each other, and we had a big smile, just appreciating the triumph. And I did not speak to my father for 3 days. He tried to speak to me, ignored him. Third afternoon, he creeps up to me very nervously, and he apologized in the most sweet way. And I said, thank you, and went off and did my homework. And you know what? For a few months, I made my dad a little bit nervous. But my dad, I was no longer nervous with my dad. And our relationship deepened. Our connection got stronger. We could disagree comfortably. We had an understanding. We had a trust that was so beautiful and only grew till the end of his life. But the best part was that he looked relieved that he no longer had to hold on and carry that baton. Thank you.
Thank you to all our storytellers. Thank you to everybody who came tonight. Our next Mudroom is December 14th. Write it on your calendars. Tickets will go on sale around November 14th. So, have a great night. Drive home safe. See you in December.